2025 was a turbulent year for Hollywood, marked by a box office slump and mass layoffs. But the U.S. film industry got a late-season bump thanks to audiences thousands of miles away in China. Walt Disney Studios' Zootopia 2 has grossed more than $1 billion and counting, becoming the most successful animated film of all time. Roughly half of that record-breaking total has come from Chinese audiences.
Zootopia 2 did over $600 million in China. It was double the box office of what it was here in America. So clearly, in that case, they didn't mind that it was a film from a studio here.
Janet Yong is a Golden Globe-winning producer and former president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Although the once red-hot partnership between the U.S. and Chinese film industries has cooled down in recent years, Yang says the relationship is evolving and still holds great potential.
The Chinese audiences want films that are very relatable to them because they've been fed now a steady diet of that with their local filmmakers. So I would not dismiss the possibility of other American films doing very, very well there, but it'll be on a much more selective basis, I believe.
Yang got her big break in the 1980s, a time when China was just reopening to the world and U.S. filmmakers were coming in small numbers.
China was really the launching pad of my career. I was the first distributor of Chinese cinema in the Western Hemisphere, and then I was hired by the studios to sell American films to China. And while I was at my office in the Universal lot, I got a call from Steven Spielberg's office, who told me that he was interested in making a film in China. That film became Empire of the Sun with an 11-year-old Christian Bale. And that was when I finally discovered what I wanted to be when I grew up, which is to produce.
Empire of the Sun tells the story of a boy separated from his parents when the Japanese invade China during World War II, a massive production with major logistical challenges.
The Chinese were incredibly cooperative, but we were breaking new ground. The infrastructure for a film, again, this size hadn't yet existed, so we did have to deploy whole work units, the public security, the firefighters, the police force, thousands and thousands and thousands of extras, and it was just a monumental effort. We did more or less shut down the city of Shanghai for several days.
Around the same time, Bernardo Bertolucci was filming another large-scale period film, The Last Emperor, a UK-led production with U.S. involvement. It would go on to win 9 Academy Awards in 1987. Although co-productions were rare, Hollywood saw great potential in China's emerging market and focused its efforts on securing wider distribution for American films. Early revenue-sharing entries included The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, Forrest Gump, and Titanic.
Filmmaking has always been part of China to collectively communicate priorities.
Chinese-American producer Peiyong Xiao's 1998 film Restless was a groundbreaking early co-production that explored relations between East and West. The film tracks the journey of a young Chinese-American man bringing his grandfather's ashes back into China.
It mirrored a little bit of my personal story and his friends that he encounters on the ground in China, which included American expats and local friends that were just hanging out at bars. We wanted to do something that was completely different, really exploring similarities rather than very, very politicized filmmaking.
In the early 2000s, following the international success of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, a vanguard of Chinese directors began to set their sights beyond the Chinese market, releasing a series of blockbuster martial arts films that captivated audiences in the U.S. and around the world.
It's a Chinese language film, and it's still the most successful foreign language film in United States box office history. Even 25 years later, nobody has reduplicated that success. What that did was whet the appetite for a lot of film producers in China that this might be an avenue forward for expanding Chinese films globally. And so in the wake of Crouching Tiger in 2000, very quickly you start getting a series of films that reduplicate that same model.
Michael Berry is professor of contemporary Chinese cultural studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, and one of the preeminent scholars of Chinese cinema in the U.S. today.
2002 Hero, and from there it's just kind of a landslide. And so 2004, House of Flying Daggers, 2006, Curse of the Golden Flower, those are all by Zhang Yimou, but also Chen Kaige is making The Promise, Feng Xiaogang's making The Banquet. And so one by one, the A-list of Chinese filmmakers start embracing this model, largely as a means to try to crack the code, that is, make a Chinese film that will work globally and appeal to global audiences.
At the same time, movie theaters were proliferating around China, bringing hit films to new audiences.
The business environment was very open. There was a lot of growth and innovation. And I know people who were musicians or jewelry designers or entrepreneurs who found a really strong foothold in China. The environment was very hospitable. And there was a lot of curiosity about China, and it was very easy to live there at the time.
The build-up culminated in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, which thrust China's culture and dynamism onto the center of the global stage.
I think that perception of what the Western world thought of China changed, especially after the Olympics. And so after that, yeah, it was also there's a lot of sort of money, a lot of capital in China at the time.
Da Yan-ing is an award-winning Chinese-American writer and director.
Multiplexes were ready. So I think that's when, it caught the eye of, for Hollywood to try to make more co-productions with China, and vice versa. Both were like ready to start, doing more films together.
The number of screens going up in China is expanding exponentially. And so you need product, you need films to fill those theaters. And Hollywood studios increasingly are getting a whiff of the money, of the possibilities in China in terms of getting their films into these screens. But the quota system is limiting that. And so what do? Well, you pivot and you start doing co-productions, because co-productions are a way of getting around the quota system.
The China gold rush was really on. I think there was a recognition not of the potential of the Chinese box office. The Chinese masses, the Chinese movie business had really arrived from a revenue point of view. So for Hollywood to really capture that, they recognized that they needed to be relevant. They needed to speak directly to a Chinese audience, obviously without losing their global core as well. So they were very interested in doing that, and there was a lot of experimentation going on to varying degrees of success.
From 2010 to 2016, China would become the world's fastest growing box office, riding a surge of co-productions and Chinese investment in Hollywood studios.
So you start getting, the remake of The Karate Kid and Forbidden Kingdom and a whole litany of these different co-productions, and some are coming from the Hollywood side, which are basically originating with, Universal or 20th Century Fox or the big studios. And they're putting in major Chinese stars or using Chinese locations to qualify as a co-production. And then there are others coming from the China side where you have a Chinese crew and cast, and then they'll plug in maybe an A-list Hollywood star, again, to try to crack the code, to bring in the international audience. The whole infrastructure of how the film industry in China was transforming was just beyond anyone's belief in terms of the level of expansion.
There was this incredible feeling of, we have a lot to offer one another. China had the market, of course, and many, many Hollywood films were doing extraordinary business in China at the time. So there was just kind of a beautiful collaboration on both sides.
The boom was not to last, though. In 2016, increasing political friction between the two countries saw co-productions plummet.
There are two factors here. One is policy and top-down restrictions, but another is just general grassroots disgust with American political platforms, which are translating into people turning away from consuming.
The box office flop of The Great Wall, a big-budget action-adventure filmed in China and starring Matt Damon, marked the end of the run.
It was very expensive to make. I think it lost something like $70 million or in that neighborhood. It received a lot of criticism, And a lot of people looked at that as the nail in the coffin of the co-production model.
Today, fewer U.S. films are being distributed in China, and co-productions have largely stalled.
People were being criticized for making these overtures. So against this entire backdrop of underperformance, of complications, and also the rise of the Chinese industry, really. I think the big story I would frame today is that I would say 15 years ago, it was really more Hollywood was the bigger, more successful entity. It had know-how, it had distribution footprint, and the local Chinese films were just catching up.
In the intervening years, China's film industry rebounded, in large part thanks to homegrown hits.
There are a lot of films that came out. I remember in particular, the film that made everybody sit up was called Taizhong, Lost in Thailand, by Xu Zheng, and it was, I believe, 2012, and it cost very little money but made over $100 million. The overall box office in China was about $1 billion. There was an increasing interest again in the market. So riding from that high, the market in China continued to grow but became less hospitable to American films.
The Battle at Lake Changjin, a 2021 war drama about North Korea allied Chinese fighters who force U.S. forces to withdraw from the battlefield, is a case in point. With a budget of $200 million, the most expensive in Chinese history, it went on to gross more than $900 million worldwide, the second highest grossing film of 2021. 4 years later, the film would be surpassed by Nja 2, an animated fantasy adventure that grossed $2.2 billion globally, making it the fifth highest grossing film of all time.
I think this is a very positive thing. The Chinese masses started to devote more attention to films that really captured their own imagination and reflected their own life experiences and their own aesthetics, which I think is a very healthy thing. So against this kind of rather complicated backdrop, it was a recalibration. And I think I would say that, so it brings us to this day where it's a new page. And it's a brand new relationship between two respective industries that have both arrived.
Although the boom days are over, Hollywood and China are now in a period of selective engagement, where co-productions are rare and smaller scale, and major U.S. films are given limited release in China.
There used to be this complaint by the Chinese movie-going public that quality-wise, they were lackluster compared to Hollywood movies. So I would say the level of quality filmmaking is there. So it's an interesting moment because it used to be taken for granted that a Hollywood global blockbuster with certain visual effects or certain star elements could perform in China almost in their sleep. Nowadays, it really has to be earned.
I think there's a misconception sometimes out here as to why the past few years Hollywood films haven't done well in China, and I actually truly believe it's less to do with any of the politics other than the actual movies themselves.
Veteran filmmakers with experience in the U.S. and China say the Hollywood-China partnership will endure, an essential means of bringing people closer together in celebration of film and culture that transcends politics.
I think the model of co-productions, which I pioneered, is maybe a little more complicated. That shouldn't stop people from reaching across the aisles, reaching across national boundaries to find new audiences, to find new creative impulses that really bring us together. And that is something that is more important than ever.
My whole life has persuaded me that cultural impact is real and it's important. And I've seen what happens when people's faces light up and they recognize someone on screen that may not look like them, but then what it does in terms of creating empathy and understanding of another culture or another region. And I just know in my heart of hearts that this changes their worldview.